Let's come to this now. As temperatures drop during the winter season, there's an increased risk of household fires. These more likely to affect those living in informal settlements where residents are dependent on candles, paraffin heaters and open fires to get by. The devastation of these fires pose a food and safety threat. But programs such as KFC's At Hope are meant to help the most vulnerable. So to talk more about this, I'm now joined by Purpose Manager at KFC, Andra Nel. And Andra, thank you so much for your time and good afternoon to you. I mean, it seems like it is the norm, right? Oftentimes when we have winter in South Africa, we know that we're bound to hear, unfortunately, of those reports of fires that, one, take lives, but also, two, pose a threat on food and safety security.
Absolutely, and it's always when it's slightly colder that the inequalities in our country
Andra, I think you might be muted. Just check if your audio is not muted. I can't hear you.
It's not muted on my
side. I can hear you now. I can hear you now. Thank you so much, Andra. I couldn't hear you earlier, but thanks. You continue.
Apologies for that. No, it's always when it's colder that the inequality in our country is always a little bit more evident, isn't it, right? We know that so many people in our country don't have the luxury of turning on a warm blanket, adding another blanket, putting on a jacket or a coat. So they really are dependent on more risky sources of heat. And what then happens is with that comes increased risk, and we see that there are these devastating incidents of people losing their lives, their loved ones, and all of the worldly possessions they had as a result of that, including the little food they had left in the house.
This also directing the most vulnerable, and I'm sure you would agree, the children. We also saw with COVID-19 and its impact when children were taken out of school that still they depended on a meal at school, and now there was a risk that they may not receive, one of the most important meals of their day. So take us through how, through Ad Hope, you are also intervening in this regard, particularly during the winter season as well.
Yes, as Ad Hope, we have got over 1,200 feeding centres across the country that operate daily, but we know that the kids go home at the end of the day. And when they are in families that are adversely affected by household fires, we know that if they have been lucky enough to not lose a loved one as a result of this devastating incident, the food that was in that house now is no longer there, which means, to your point, that the most vulnerable, our children, are left without. So what Ad Hope intends to do is not only make sure that children have enough to eat at school so that they can learn, grow and thrive and meet all of their developmental milestones, but that when disaster strikes and they are in their greatest moment of need, that they don't have to worry about where their next meal comes from. We have been assisting through Gift to the Givers and Hope Worldwide, which are some of the beneficiaries that we partner with to help those families that have been affected by household fires, especially in the winter months, with relief feeding and making sure that for the next couple of months, they've got the food that they need to make sure that when they're trying to put their lives back together, when they are trying to recover from what I can only imagine is a very devastating incident and quite traumatic, that at the very least, people in that house don't have to worry that the kids and themselves don't have something to eat.
Right. And you mentioned, Gift to the Givers as some of your partners, and we can imagine the reach as you try to assist as many, children as possible. So when we look at the stats, Andra, how many, if you're able to share, were you able to reach through this initiative?
So if you just look at the scale of fires, I'd like to start there. So firstly, last year, Gauteng EMD said that they saw more than 400 responses to household fires in the Gauteng area alone. The Western Cape had 110 fires. So what we have been doing, we've assisted more than 200 families over the last 2 winters, and we continue to assist more. Most recently, we had 16 families in June that were everything they had was destroyed in the Laagte community. So we then go on the ground, we make sure that we deliver non-perishable food, while other organizations are obviously assisting with what is required to help them get back onto their feet and as they rebuild. So this is an ongoing effort, and we want to let the community in South Africa know that if you know of incidents like this that are occurring where we can help and where your 2 rands and our KFC donations can make the most difference and the most meaningful impact for these families, please let us know. We know that this is an ongoing risk. We know that families are needing to make use of fires and heat sources that might not be safe, and that this is some of the consequence of that. But we want to be there when they need us most, and together we can help them.
Right. You mentioned the R2 contribution, quite important to your Add Hope campaign, Andra, but I've often also heard, some customers saying, why not take the R2 from the meal that I've already purchased? Why is it significant that I have to add a R2 extra? Perhaps take us through how far this R2 actually goes and stretches.
Absolutely. So the reason why we don't add it to the meals, because we believe that donation always is a choice. We wouldn't just add it to the meal and get you to pay more for a meal. We want to make sure that, you have the option to add hope when you come to KFC. Now, last year alone, the R2 amounted to 67 million rand. Now, added to KFC's own donation, we raised 107 million rand last year alone, which means that the small change and something that, for a lot of us, we might not significantly feel that investment. The reality is that people are able to make the biggest change through that small change that they get every time they buy the world's best fried chicken.
Well, Andra, I appreciate you speaking to us about this, but also commending KFC for their Add Hope initiative, its campaign. I know it goes beyond the winter season and the fires, but also the significance it plays during this time for the most vulnerable, which are children. That effort not going unnoticed. Thank you so much for speaking to me about this. Purpose Manager at KFC Andra Nel, thank you so much for your time this